Yeah, Angelica, where are you? Please tell me you're here.
All right, everyone, why don't we begin? I wanted to start off by backtracking a little bit. We're in Book 9 of Paradise Lost, and we're going to go all the way to the end today, because we have to stick with the syllabus and what is on it. And I wanted to backtrack a little bit because you recall I had said and mentioned it and emphasized to some degree how hell is a place prepared for Satan and the fallen archangels, those who had rebelled against God. But it also seemed to represent something of the attitude that characters have towards God. Their psychological framework, if you will, is hellish. So that when Satan first saw Adam and Eve in Book 4, he was struck by their beauty and by even by the earth itself, and how much he desired to be there, but yet he could not enjoy it, because he found that despite what he'd said when he was at the bottom of hell, that the mind is its own place, that the mind was not its own place, and that he didn't have control even over his own thoughts, so that he could not even, as it said in Book 4, step 1 foot out from hell, because he bore hell with him. And this is borne out, I wanted just to reiterate, in Book 9 here, when line 456, he sees Eve on her own, and he has these reflections. I'm just going to say it before I go back forward to where we were last time. He sees that the sweet recess of Eve, thus early, thus alone, her heavenly form angelic, but more soft and feminine, her graceful innocence, her every air of gesture or least action overawed his malice. Overawed his malice, so it stopped him from his hate for her. And with rapine sweet, bereaved his fierceness of the fierce intent it brought. That space, the evil one the evil one abstracted stood from his own evil, and for the time remained stupidly good, of enmity disarmed, of guile, of hate, of envy, of revenge. So for a second he hesitates because he's in the presence of such goodness and such beauty, and he is stopped. And he's as if his evil stood apart from him, and he appears as if he's good just for a second, because he doesn't want to do the evil which he came to do. And that's the effect of her beauty and goodness, which is evident in her form. But it doesn't last for long, and it says, 467, but the hot hell that always in him burns, though in mid-heaven, i.e. the earth, soon ended his delight, and tortures him now more, the more he sees of pleasure not for him ordained. Then soon fierce hate he recollects, and all his thoughts of mischief, gratulating thus excites. And then he reminds himself, so, have you forgot what hither brought us? Hate, not love, nor hope of paradise for hell. Hope here to taste of pleasure, but all pleasure to destroy. So he didn't come here to enjoy himself or to get any enjoyment. He knows that that's not possible for him. He simply came to kill and destroy. That's what he's there for. And that's what he's going to do. And he says, there's no pleasure save in destroying. Other joy to me is lost. So he's under no illusions. There's no other possibility for him but to ruin other things, and that is what he's now going to do. I just wanted to observe that, and I think it's interesting because Milton keeps on saying how much hell is something that is a reflection of one's attitude towards God as well as a literal place. There's this sort of the psychological, what we would now call the psychological dimension of hell is there evident in Satan. It's very interesting, Milton exploring that in this character. Comments or questions? But again, there's that repeated emphasis, and we're going to see coming in Book 12, when Adam and Eve are thrown out of paradise, that they nonetheless have a consolation of the paradise within them. Yes?
So, is Satan actually able to experience pleasure in destroying, or is it just
No.
something he does?
Yeah. No, because you can only get pleasure from something good, and destroying is not good. So it's not pleasure. So it's just a definition of terms. He seems to want to do it. Normally, when we think about things that are pleasurable, we think about a good in them. Plato, or Socrates in Plato's dialogue, says that nobody ever does evil things for the sake of evil. They do it for some perceived good. There's a benefit that they perceive in doing it. So you don't do it for the evil, you do it for the perceived good in it. Some benefit. I'm going to steal from you, not because I want to do a bad thing, but because I want the good thing that you have. So evil is, nobody does evil deeds for the sake of evil. They do them for the sake of something perceived to be good in it, and that we may call it evil because it is an evil, but it's not done for the evil. And he says nobody ever does a bad thing because it's bad. So evil then is a privation of the good. It goes along the same lines. That's Augustine's argument.
In that, then, why wouldn't Satan sit there and kind of enjoy Eve, have that pleasure, for himself, and then do his act? If what he was doing was trying to get the good out of the evil.
Because he's so perverted that he can't seem to enjoy the good even. If it's only temporary, the way Milton describes it, he was temporarily overawed by the good, but it didn't last long, because as soon as he thought about it, he realized that he could never enjoy the good, and the fact that he couldn't enjoy it made him mad. Yes?
I just noticed the other day, reading Genesis 3 near the end,
Yes.
section that says paradise lost God's judgment. Like, is that something to do with?
Is that in Genesis 3?
Yeah.
As a
That's a header.
Oh, a header. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's not in the text. That's the editor's. So the editor of that version of the Bible has put that in as just a sort of an organizing title, but it's not part of the original text.
It's not related to this.
Oh, it is. They've probably got it from Milton's Paradise Lost. That's why they've called it that. Yeah. Yes.
So you're saying, like, having to do with Ivy's question, like, people don't do bad things because they don't want to hurt someone. It's just like the benefit that they want from it. Like, I don't want to steal from you because I want to hurt you. Is because I want the thing from you. Or is like
so even if I want to hurt you, I want to hurt you for some other reason.
Like,
what is the reason?
Yeah.
Like the reason, we may say it's sick and twisted, but
yeah.
I want to hurt this person because this person hurt that person. So I'm enjoying the fact that this person, I think, is getting some sort of justice. So you beat up my little sister or whatever, and now I'm going to beat you up, and I'm going to enjoy it, and I am enjoying it. So but I'm not actually enjoying that per se. I'm enjoying the fact that I'm
doing.
Sort of. That's what Plato would argue, I think.
So how would you it's kind of like off.
But it's note how it's all twisted together, right?
Or like even like when somebody murders someone else.
Yeah.
Like, is it like I guess they kind of follow that way too. Then I guess they feel like they need to do it for some good reason.
I'm not convinced. So having said all this, I'm not convinced that the account that is in the reason it's there is theologically speaking it's true, but it's in some cases it seems like people can be particularly wicked and do it for wicked reasons. It really does. The existence of radical evil doesn't.
They just do it because they really just want to do something bad.
Yeah, like evil be thou my good, as Satan says in the bottom of hell. He says, "Evil be thou my good." Almost so he's now consciously made that choice. And can people do that same thing? I almost think that they can. But then what are they saying when they say evil be thou my good? They're saying evil you be my God. So again, I'm going to worship you and I'm going to get something from that. So there is however perverted, there's a perceived good in that. I can't be on the right side with God. I can't leave hell. So if God won't be my God because the logic's perverted, but then what's left to me, evil. Okay, you be my good. I'm going to serve you rather than anything good then. And that will get me something. And of course, if evil is nothing, then it's not going to get him anything.
Anywhere, yeah.
And so he's got nowhere to go, but he has to do it because, he has to do it in the sense that he has no options there. He's gone down that path. He is that sort of figure. But he's serving, ultimately, he can't win, and ultimately he's serving a futile course of action. But anyway, and self-destructive at that. And it makes him more miserable. Milton makes that repeatedly clear, that as the more he does, the worse it is for him, and the hell that he experienced before opens up to a still lower and worse hell. So it's a really powerful exploration of a profoundly disturbing thing for all people, this thing we call evil, and its nature. Tolkien explores it in his works as well. I talked about that in my science fiction Sub-Creation. It's explored there as well. But it's a challenging subject, and how God, who's good and omniscient, should allow for such a thing. How do those exist, and how do those two things exist together? And furthermore, how do we hold that God is actually God then in the presence of this thing which we experience as so evil as it appears to be? Okay, let me move on. So I left off with the beginning of Satan's temptation of Eve, and her surprise at the fact that he's speaking, and of course he flatters her and says that she deserves to be seen amongst a better company than those that are around her, namely a bunch of beasts who can't even speak, except for one man, and there's only one man, and she deserves, with her form angelic as it is, to be in the company of those who are her peers, not those who are beneath her, so that would be worthy. So he's announcing to her, or creating a perception of injustice. You deserve better than what you have here. And yes, Adam does appreciate you, but he's only one man, and you're, right? So there's a perception of not what she has, but what she doesn't have for the first time. And even if she thinks that there's a hole in this argument, she still likes what he's saying because there's some truth in it, and she likes being complimented. And she's surprised that this beast can speak, which she thought was impossible. How is it that you've come to speak? I didn't know this was even possible. Speak again. So he does. And he explains, 568, Empress of this fair world, resplendent Eve, easy to me it is to tell thee all that thou commandest, and right that thou shouldst be obeyed. I was at first as other beasts that graze the trodden herb, of abject thoughts and low, as was my food, nor aught but food discerned or sex, and apprehended nothing high. Till on a day, roving the field, I chanced a goodly tree fared far distant to behold, loaden with fruit of fairest colors mixed, ruddy and gold. I nearer drew to gaze, when from the boughs a savory odor blown, grateful to appetite, more pleased my sense than smell of sweetest fennel, or the teats of ewe, or a goat dropping with milk at even, unsucked of lamb or kid, that tend their play. To satisfy the sharp desire I had of tasting those fair apples, I resolved not to defer. Hunger and thirst at once, powerful persuaders, quickened at the scent of that alluring fruit, urge me so keen. Now note that he's painting a whole picture here, and he's doing it in such wonderful language, and think, wow, this sounds great. What sort of fruit must this be that would meet this? Like, it's a beautiful description. And he says, he wound him around the tree, for high from ground the branches would require thy utmost reach, or Adam's. Round the tree all other beasts that saw, with like desire, longing and envying food, but could not reach. So it looks like it's intended for them, It's at that height. The other beast can't reach it, and he's only managed to by climbing up above his station. Amid the tree now got, where plenty hung tempting, so nigh to pluck and eat my fill, I spared not. For such pleasure till that hour at feed or fountain never had I found. Sated at length, ere long I might perceive strange alteration in me, to degree of reason in my inward powers, and speech wanted not long, though to this shape retained. Thenceforth to speculations, high or deep, I turned my thoughts, and with capacious mind, that is, with a wide-reaching mind, considered all things visible in heaven, or earth, or middle, all things fair and good. But all that fair and good in thy divine semblance, and in thy beauty's heavenly ray, united I beheld. No fair to thine equivalent, or second, which compelled me thus, though importune perhaps, to come and gaze and worship thee, of right declared sovereign of creatures, universal dame. So how did this happen? And note that the little commentary by the narrator here, so talked the spirited sly snake, and Eve yet more amazed on where he thus replied. So she's being brought into a maze. She's getting disoriented. Why is she being disoriented? Because he's given her an explanation that she cannot understand. It makes no sense to her. On the other hand, seeing is believing. Here I have a snake that can speak. And not only can speak, but can reason, and to speak well, and to persuade. He clearly has the capacity for reason, but I thought this was impossible. How is it possible? How is it even possible? Well, the argument is going to go, and Satan is going to make it, or rather the serpent is going to make it. There's such thing as the great chain of being. God, who stands at the top of the great chain of being, and the angels who stand beneath him, and then mankind, and then the animals, and then the inanimate world, vegetables, whatever. But these are still living, and then etc. Now, the serpent represents the animals. What has happened to the serpent? Well, the serpent has raised himself above his station in the great chain of being. He's being given the capacity of speech and reasoning, just like a person. He looks the same, but there's an inner transformation that's taken place. And he's not just speculating, he's demonstrating that this has happened. And all of it was from this fruit which seemed to have been intended for them. Because look where it was. It was so tempting, and so good, and so good. Look at its effects were good. You'll know a fruit by you'll know an action by its fruits. Here, the action of the fruits are, the fruits of the action of eating the fruit are that he is given speech and reasoning. She dismisses it to some degree. Serpent, thy overpraising leaves in doubt the virtue of that fruit in thee first prove, but say where grows the tree? From hence how far? Well, let me lead you there. Come on. So then he goes, and Milton describes him leading her onward, and he says, he made intricate seem straight. Looks like a straight path there, but actually he's weaving it all around, so she's disoriented, doesn't know where the tree is, where she probably does know where the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is, but doesn't know that she's been led there until she's finally there. To the tree of prohibition, as Milton calls it, 644, root of all our woe, says Milton. Which when she saw, thus to her guide she spake, serpent, we might have spared our coming hither, fruitless to me, though fruit be here to excess, the credit of whose virtue rest with thee, wondrous indeed if cause of such effects. But of this tree we may not taste nor touch. God so commanded, and left that command sole daughter of his voice. The rest we live law to ourselves. Our reason is our law. Now note that she says that her reason is her law. It's actually her obedience that is her law, but now she's left it to her reasoning. Well, he can disorient her reason. Remember, he said some reason, some fair, unsuspected, or specious good could misinform the reason. So he told her to obey, did Adam. If you want to prove your constancy, prove first your obedience. Not your reasoning power, but she's pushing it in the realm of reasoning. And it's not that reasoning is false, but reason can be misinformed to do what God has expressly forbidden. That's what she was told. But now he said that reason is her law. Well, that's an interesting step. Yes.
But isn't she right in that?
She is right.
That their only law is to not eat from this tree, and the rest is permissible.
Correct. But she says that her reason is her law. That's right. Whatever they think, and that's correct. Yes, so she's not wrong. Nothing she said here is wrong. But there's the problem, is that there, and Adam has specifically warned her about that. Your reason can be misinformed. And you can will something that has been expressly forbidden. And yet your reason will say, why not? At which point, you should obey for the sake of obeying, not because it seems right to you. Yes?
Side point. So in Genesis 2, verse 15, it talks about that's when God made man, and he said, but the Lord warned him, you can freely eat of the fruit of the tree of the garden, except the fruit of good and evil. And then after, he said, it's not good for man to be alone, I will make you a helper. So he gave those instructions to Adam,
Okay, well, you're taking my point. Good.
not as much Eve.
No, she's not there. She's a rib. The command was given to Adam, not to Eve. Not to Adam and Eve. She is not yet on the scene. Now, if you take that as a historical description, whatever, I mean, that's certainly one obvious point there. Eve is not even around. The commandment has been given to Adam. Now, Adam, when he passes on the commandment to Eve, what does Eve say in the Genesis 3 text? Because Eve, the serpent, Satan asks Eve what, or she volunteers what she's not allowed to do here. What does she say? Can't even touch it, so she's added a prohibition. We're not to eat of it nor touch it lest we die.
He said, did God really say you must not eat of the fruit of any tree in the garden?
Right?
Of course we may eat fruit from the trees in the garden when we're not dying. It is only the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden that we are not allowed to eat. God said you must not eat it or touch it or you will die.
Right.
I guess Adam must have told her that.
Well, that's speculation on your part and my part, but who else would have brought her to that conclusion that she can't even touch it? But it's not in the prohibition that God gave to Adam, and it's not even what the serpent said to the question that the serpent posed to Eve either. He said, "Are you really not allowed to eat of any of these trees in the garden?" No, just one, and we're not allowed to touch it. Well, how did the serpent know? Did the serpent know that added prohibition had been there? That's my question. I think the answer is he did. He probably overheard the conversation and heard Adam add the prohibition, making it an additional thing. Well, how, in terms of reasoning, how could you fall by merely touching that? I don't know. But the point is there, in the Genesis text, there's been an additional prohibition added to it. And that's important. So if you're going to follow the rules, you better know what the rules are and not change them and add to them and so forth. But yes.
Could that not have been Eve in that moment finding a way to defend herself, or finding a way to kind of convince herself not to touch that tree? Like, what if Adam had never said you can't touch it?
He might not have, and she might have just added to it. You know what? I'm not even going to touch it. Not even going to go anywhere near it. So the spirit of the question, no, we're not to eat it, not even touch it, lest we die, is that she added that. So she's so anxious about it. And then he speaks to that anxiety by saying, no, it will make you as gods.
So is this like Eve saying to Satan, like, did she say to him that she can't eat it, like,
nor
or
touch it
at all?
Yes.
But it didn't say, like, actually, like, in the Bible that she can't touch it?
No,
It's
it
like
said nowhere that God said they can't eat of it.
Just eat it.
Just eat.
Oh, okay.
she's the one who can't eat or touch. She's added the prohibition of touching. Now, we don't hear Adam saying that. We only hear Eve saying that. Where does she get it from? Did Adam tell her that? Because, again, she wasn't around. Or has she now added the prohibition herself? We don't know. We don't know. But there's been an additional prohibition there on top of it, maybe to protect herself or for Adam to be protective of her. I don't know, but she's added to the prohibition.
Sure.
Maybe she is in the face of a talking snake. I don't know. Yeah.
She probably understood that if she would go up and touch the fruit, that she already fell in temptation in the sense that she would want to
Like, why would you even touch it if you're not supposed to eat it, right? So I'm not going. So is it? Well, you're rationalizing it that's what she must. I don't know, and maybe Adam doing the same thing. Let's stay well clear of that tree. Don't even touch the fruit. But the only thing we can say for sure is that it's an additional prohibition that's been added to it by Adam and or Eve or both. And with that, I think an opening comes. Because now the prohibition seems to have an additional complexity. And now it's not a sole prohibition. And why is it being prohibited? And that's where Satan is going to make his push. Why is it being prohibited? So to whom the tempter guilefully replied, "Indeed, hath God then said that of the fruit of all these garden trees ye shall not eat? Yet lords declared of all in earth or air." He makes them be fruitful and multiply, exercise dominion over the earth. Without restraint. You're going to be lords. Right? That's what he said. So you're lords. Don't eat of that. Oh, so I'm Lord accepting that.
He's like twisting the words.
But he's declared. So did he say? Did he say? He did. He said exactly those things. Where's the contradiction? He said you were lords, but you can't do that, which means you're not lords. So which one of them holds true here? Are you not lords? Or maybe you can eat of the tree. Like, which is it? Because one of them's going to have to go. That's where he's pushing. To whom thus Eve, yet sinless, of the fruit of each tree in the garden we may eat, but of the fruit of this fair tree amidst the garden, God hath said, ye shall not eat thereof, nor shall ye yet touch it, lest ye die. She scarce had said, though brief, when now more bold, the tempter, but with show of zeal and love to man, and indignation at his wrong. New part puts on, and as to passion moved, fluctuates, disturbed, yet comely, and an act raised, as of some great matter to begin, as when of old, epic simile, as when of old some orator renowned in Athens or free Rome, where eloquence flourished, since mute, to some great cause address, stood in himself collected, while each part, motion, each act, one audience ere the tongue, sometimes in height began, as no delay of preface brooking, through his zeal of right, so standing, moving, or to height upgrown the tempter, all impassioned thus began. So he is indignant on mankind's behalf. He's a humanitarian. Satan's the first humanitarian. He speaks on mankind's behalf at the wrong being done to mankind by this prohibition. They've been called lords of heaven and earth, and yet they're not allowed to do this silly little thing that he's just done. How outrageous. And look at the benefits that they would get from it. So God clearly does not have their good in mind with this. So now he comes to this speech. O sacred, wise, and wisdom-giving plant, mother of science, now I feel thy power within me clear, not only to discern things in their causes, but to trace the ways of highest agents, that is, of God. Now I understand what God means. Deemed, however, wise, queen of this universe, do not believe those rigid threats of death. Ye shall not die. How should ye? By the fruit it gives you life to knowledge. By the threatener, look on me, me who have touched and tasted, yet both live and life more perfect have attained than fate meant me, by venturing higher than my lot. Shall that be shut to man which to the beast is open. Remember, you have dominion over the beast, and the beasts have done it and they benefited. But you, a man who has dominion over the beast, can't do it? Or will God incense his ire for such a petty trespass and not praise, rather, your dauntless virtue, whom the pain of death denounced, whatever thing death be, deterred not from achieving what might lead to happier life, knowledge of good and evil, of good, how just, of evil, if what is evil be real, why not known, since easier shunned? This is a bad argument, but an argument that's been used repeatedly. You can't know it's wrong until you check it out for yourself. Not true. You're just doing it because you're afraid, but you're not doing it because you know it's wrong. You're just doing it because you're afraid. You won't try it. Just try it. And he says, God therefore cannot hurt ye, and be just. Not just, not God. Not feared then, nor obeyed. Your fear itself of death removes the fear. Why then was this forbid? Why but to awe? Why but to keep ye low and ignorant, his worshippers? He knows that in the day ye eat thereof, your eyes that seem so clear, yet are but dim, shall perfectly be then opened and cleared, and ye shall be as gods, knowing both good and evil, as they know that ye should be as gods, since I, as man, internal man, is but proportion meet. I of brute human, ye of human gods. So ye shall die, perhaps, by putting off human to put on gods. So that's that sort of death, a metaphorical death. You'll die as a human in order to become a god. Death to be wished, though threatened, which no worse than this can bring. And what are gods that man may not become as they participate in godlike food? The gods are first, and that advantage use on our belief, that all from them proceeds. I question it. For this fair earth I see, warmed by the sun, producing every kind. Them, nothing. If they all things who enclose knowledge of good and evil in this tree, that whoso eats thereof forthwith attains wisdom without their leave. And wherein lies the offense that man should thus attain to know? What can your knowledge hurt him, or this tree impart against his will, if all be his? Or is it envy, and can envy dwell in heavenly breasts? These and many more causes import your need of this fair fruit, goddess humane. Reach then and freely taste. So it's a pretty persuasive speech. Yes.
So he begins this whole chain by saying, affirming something that's pretty true, that she's a lord and this.
Yeah, she's using God's own words.
Yes. So would that mean that in her disobeying, her true nature would really change? Like, would she, like, when they fall, do they cease to be these lords? Do they cease? Like,
No, the dominion mandate does not cease because God has said so.
Mhm.
They do not cease to be responsible. To have dominion over the earth is to be responsible for it as king and queens, as regents.
So their nature doesn't change to go higher or
No.
lower?
Well, no, it becomes fallen. But it doesn't actually go down to the level of a beast or a vegetable, let alone. It becomes sinful and perverted. But so the image of God in them, this is another question. What does it mean by the image of God? Adam and Eve each bears God, the image of the two together bears the image of God, right? Genesis 1:26. So God created mankind in his own image. In his image created he him, male and female created he them. In his image. Note that they are in his image, but they aren't his image, by the way. Jesus is the image of the invisible God. He is the image. Jesus is the image. They are in the image. They aren't the image. So they're not gods. That's what's being said. There's a categorical, but nonetheless, there's some sort of analogy being made there. When they sin, they don't cease to be made in the image of God, because if they cease to be made in the image of God, they'd cease to be human. Because a human being bears the image of God. So nobody even a sinner ceases to be made in the image of God, which is precisely why we can't do things to people who bear the image of God, whatever we would like to do, because everyone, however wicked they are, still bears the image of God and needs to be treated as such. Right? Because they still bear. What happens is the image of God is defaced. I'll put it in the Latin. The imago Dei. The image of God is defaced. It's like graffitied over. It's been wrecked, but it's still there. If it hasn't been effaced, so it's defaced, not effaced. If it were effaced, it would be gone altogether, in which case we would no longer be human. But we have no capacity to do that. Even sin, even though it's a contradiction of our nature, does not remove our humanity from us. We are still God's creatures and bear his image. And that's why we can be redeemed. Otherwise, we could not be redeemed if we did not bear the image of God. Animals cannot be redeemed. They don't bear the image of God. They're also not sinners. They are corrupted by the fall. They're subject to the fall, but they're not actually sinners. Animals are not sinners. They don't have a moral nature. We do. And so it's defaced the image of God in us, but it's not removed altogether.
Could we say then that they lost the freedom to consistently act in that image?
Absolutely. They totally lose the freedom. Did I not say that in Genesis 3? So Adam and Eve, before the fall, were free to choose whether to love God or not to. Like that's the choice that lays before Eve. Are you going to obey him or disobey him? That's why the tree's been put there. Right? Because how else would they be able to demonstrate that they love God for his own sake other than to have a choice not to do it? It demonstrates that they have the free will. Having said that, once they choose not to do that and they choose to disobey him, because she will deliberately choose to disobey, and so will Adam. When they choose to do that, their will is no longer free. It's bound by sin. And now they cannot choose to love God because sin enslaves them, enthralls them, to use Milton's words in Book 3. So God created their nature till they enthrall themselves. And now they are about to do that. Once they do, we who are born thereafter are born in sin. And we cannot free ourselves from the grip of sin, which is a bad state to be in, I think you'll agree. Because the penalty of sin is death, but also being cursed by God. Well, mankind is under a curse by God. The good news is that they can be freed from it. But that's God's initiative. It's not a human initiative. God has to call people and regenerate them, and then they can choose in their regenerated nature to choose God. But they have to be born again. God gives them the capacity to choose him. But that's God's initiative. Right? They don't choose to follow God and then they're reborn. They're reborn and then they choose God. But that's God's initiative. Right? Which is why we give God, we'd say it's an act of grace. It's not anything we can get credit for. Yes?
So God cannot look or be in the presence of sin, and therefore
he loathes sin.
Jesus is created as
God is, Jesus is the image of God. He's also man, fully God and fully man.
Redeem us from sin.
Correct?
And going back here, when Adam and Eve so-called sinned and ate of the fruit of good and evil, then Jesus wasn't in that time, so God couldn't be in that presence. Right?
I don't understand.